in East Asia post-RCEP expectations. Our second speaker is Nilanjan Banik, Professor and Program Director, School of Management, Mahindra University, Hyderabad. The speaker will be looking at engagement and isolation with China. How much does India stand to gain or lose? Our third speaker is Dr. Roger, Associate Professor, Department of Social Science, Plain University, Pune. He will be speaking on the topic, promoting practical engagement between India and Taiwan with the Quad framework in the post-RCEP era, opportunities and challenges. Our fourth speaker for the session is Professor To Hailo, Director, Center for WTO Studies and Adjunct Professor of Diplomacy, National Chengchi University, Taipei. The speaker will be looking at Taiwan-India economic relations in the post-RCEP era. Our final speaker, also the panel convener for this session, is G. Venkat Raman. He's an Associate Professor, Humanities and Social Science Department, Indian Institute of Management, Indore. He is also an Adjunct Fellow at the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. He'll be speaking on India's foreign policy, challenges, and the politics of regional trade agreements. Chairing this panel is Professor G. Balatchandirane, retired from the Department of East Asian Studies, University of Delhi, and has been a visiting professor at the University of Kanazawa, Yokohama National University, and Osaka University, Japan. He is interested in comparative issues of economic development in East Asia. He was a member of the Job Migration Task Force of the Association of Computing Machinery of the USA. He is currently Associate Editor of the AICEAS Quarterly Journal, China Report. Before I invite the panel convener to begin the proceedings, let me lay out the housekeeping rules. All participants, except for the speaker, shall be muted for the duration of the event. Participants are requested to send in their questions by the chat box or use the raise hand option. Please unmute yourself only when called upon to do so by the chair. I now invite G. Venkat Raman to begin the proceedings. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, a very good morning to all of you. Thanks a lot to ICS and Shivnada University for coming up with this idea of having the first East Asian conference. I think for a very long time, our outlook towards East Asia has been kind of sabotaged and overwhelmed by a very China-centric approach. So hearty congratulations for coming up with this much needed initiative. Having said this, the idea of proposing this panel was, it just came out of a conversation between, few colleagues. And immediately, all five of us, we got in touch with each other and we said that why not, have a topic like this? What are India's options as we go ahead, in the post-RCEP era? So RCEP, as we all know, is seen as a historical deal. There are different takes for this. Yeah? Some people say it's a very significant moment in terms of making 21st century an Asian century, for Asia, by Asia. The shift in the economic center of gravity from west to east. Well, some others, in the media especially have characterized it as a moment of victory for China, with the region increasingly likely to witness Sino-US rivalry. Whereas yet others have witnessed it as a victory of quote-unquote middle power diplomacy, with ASEAN being in the center of action. No matter what RCEP has created, it's the largest trading bloc in Asia Pacific region, accounting for 30% of global GDP, covering 2.2 billion people. Now, given this, India has opted to stay out of RCEP after 27 rounds of painstaking negotiations. Given this, what are India's options? How does India seek to engage with the region outside RCEP ambit? How can it realize its geostrategic and geo-economic objectives as per its Act East policy? These are some of the things that we as a panel seek to look from multiple perspectives. So with these few words, I would request the chair to take over and help us and anchor the proceedings.
Thank you, Dr. Venkat Raman. I think that is a nice introductory piece, and you have obviated some of my duties. Thank you. Let me welcome each and every one of the speakers. This theme is extremely important to us. And I'd just like to flag one or two issues and let each of the presenters get on with their papers. I'm going to touch on something extremely basic so that our discussions are grounded. I think it's quite useful to recall the basic rationale behind the formation of RSAP before we get into the details. RSAP is ultimately a trade pact, and any trade pact qualifies to be called as an economic institution.
Hello.
An economic institution. Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, sir. Continue.
Yeah. An institution is nothing but a setup comprising of at least two or more members. This setup is created so that some economic gain is captured, or the members can try to influence policy decision so that in future some economic gain can be captured. I think we keep this basic point in mind. What does RSAP aim at? It aims at raising the intra-group trade through the reduction of tariffs and unified rules of origin. The ultimate idea, of course, is that the economic growth of the member countries would be favorably impacted. The more the number of members, the larger would be the benefit that accrues to each and every member. RSAP, as you well know, has taken effect from the 1st of January 2022. The members being the 10 ASEAN members, plus the, Australia, New Zealand, China, Japan, and South Korea. Easily the largest trade bloc in history, accounting for, as it has been already pointed out, 30% of global population, as well as a similar share of global GNP. Now, turning to discussions on India's engagement with East Asia in the post-RCEP era, this will likely to throw up a number of issues. And there are two issues which are elephantine in nature, and I'm just going to briefly touch on them and move on. The first elephant in the room is, of course, China. Its dominating presence. The second elephant in the room is there because of its absence, and it is India. Now, we have a fairly good amount of literature on whether India should have joined or not, and whether it should join now. India, after having participated in the discussions for 8 long years, has pulled out in November 2019 because some of the issues that it had flagged were not addressed adequately. These related to rules of origin and the opening up of services. Additionally, the cool reception to India's suggestion on auto trigger and snapback mechanism if the imports crossed a threshold simply was not encouraging. The record of countries like Japan, China, and Australia, as far as non-tariff barriers are concerned, was a major concern for India. India also worried about the likelihood of dumping of manufactured goods from China, as well as agricultural dairy products from Australia and New Zealand, areas in which the comparative advantage is extremely tilted against India. It needs to be kept in mind that over the last 5 years, RSAP members have accounted for 70% of India's trade deficit. The large and increasing trade deficit with China, even before RSAP became operational, is another concern area for India. Probably the last straw was the Galwan aggression from the point of view of India. The remaining members who had earlier felt that the presence of India would be a counterweight to China have ensured that the doors are open and India can join anytime if it has a change of heart. As things stand now, despite having been created by ASEAN, RSAP is likely to be a China-dominant grouping with much heft in the hands of China. Predictions are that China, Japan, and South Korea would be the 3 largest beneficiaries in the near future. China, it is believed, would be able to rewrite the rules for trade in this region, especially after the decline of the US from this region, as seen by the Trump's pullout from the TPP. Now, the expectations from the Rsap members is that multilateralism would grow in the bloc, tariffs would drastically come down, local businesses would enter global markets, and free trade in general would rise. What is majorly missing in Rsap is concerns about labor, environment, and state-owned enterprises, all of which are issues which China would rather not discuss about. Incidentally, these are important chapters in the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. The fact that the members of the Rsap bloc are at highly different levels of economic development could lead to issues. For example, Singapore's per capita income is about 50 times that of Myanmar. And some members might find that India's fears were not unwarranted completely. With just these remarks, I would request the speakers to start with their presentations. We proceed in the given order, and the basic ground rules, I think, have been already outlined. Each speaker gets about 10 minutes to make his presentation, and the questions can be sent to the chat box. I would like to start with Dr. Debashis Chakraborty, Associate Professor of the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, Kolkata. He would be talking on India's trade engagement with East Asia, post-RCEP expectations. Dr. Debashis.
Thank you very much, sir. Let me just go ahead with my presentation. Before that, I would like to thank the organizers for organizing this most apt conference at this juncture and inviting us to be part of this panel. I will use a small PPT to substantiate my point. Let me share my screen with you. Is the screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm thankful to the chair for actually talking about the India's trade deficit with China. So he eased my part a little. I will have a quick transition along this line of thought. Number one, how important is the East in India's economic engagements? If we look into India's regional trade agreement architecture in operational, the trade blocks where India is part of engagements, and the discontinued blocks, we see the East presence in each of the three subcategories, and East dominates actually. Even in the last category, as we know, India pulled out from RCEP. Now, the reason is, what is the economic undercurrent for most of the blocks? We know countries usually enter for regional trade agreement for economic growth. In Indian example, what we see for the last couple of years, from 2004 onwards, when India actively started following a regional trade agreement strategy, starting with Singapore initially and followed by ASEAN, South Korea, Japan, Malaysia, and other trade blocs. It had been a twin objective: exporting the service and getting technology from Singapore, South Korea, Japan, and other technologically advanced countries, because it was kind of a foregone conclusion that manufacturing export to East and Southeast Asia might be difficult. We might have a look at the trade orientation of India that evolved over the period. I'm looking at export and import share of India with select East and Southeast Asian partners. As you can see, our export to these countries have export share on average only marginally. But if you look into import share, I think I should just look at the China's import share, India's import from China, and that underlines the point. As a result of that, if we try to look into India's trade balance with rest of the countries, I think, again, I don't really need to explain the result. It is obvious from the table. It's negative over the period. So if we have to invent the logic why India pulled out of RCEP, I think all of us will agree here. It's the trade that ruled India's decision. pull out. And as the chair rightly pointed out, the dairy product and other agricultural product from Australia, New Zealand, and manufacturing products from China that forced India's hands. Now, having said that, RCEP pullout is the past. So what about the future? Let me spend a few minutes on that. I would like to talk on the importance of Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan in this context and come back to the question of trade once again. One of the major reasons why we find that India is having a huge trade deficit, a growing and widening trade deficit actually over the period, is the specialization pattern. India is specializing in the relatively mid and low level of technology spectrum, whereas China, Japan, South Korea, they are specializing in the higher end of the technology spectrum. Having said that, what is the role, how India visualize they can correct this scenario and engage with the East in a more meaningful manner? If we look into the history once again, if we look at the example of Vietnam, for instance, it came up in the export map of the world in recent period with help of Japanese and other countries' technology transfer. That kind of technology India had never received in the past, primarily because it had a bit focus on the service segment. Manufacturing was always secondary in India's development strategy, though it received the focus in terms of policy support for employment creation. The comparative advantage was not there. In that connection, what we see today, India is trying to look at the Make in India launched in 2014. The year is the same as the launch of the Act East policy. So on one hand, we tried to enhance the engagement with the East, at the same time strengthening, consolidating the manufacturing sector. And second, the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, in the recent period, the Prime Minister also talked about improving the domestic manufacturing segment for reducing the import dependence on China and other countries. So the question is, can India engage with the other countries, barring China, within RCEP and countries outside RCEP, say Taiwan, for an economic engagement? The answer can be yes. And we have already seen the Foxconn, for instance, trying to establish their plant in Tamil Nadu for manufacturing of smartphone, and several other South Korean and Taiwanese corporates entry in Indian market underlines this plan. Now, having said that, I would like to take 1 minute in looking at India's domestic value addition content. Let me take a minute in explaining what do we mean by OECD TIVA table here. Here we see India's export of $100. In that export, what is the value contribution from each country? And the India column, India row, it shows the domestic value addition. Rule of thumb is, if in a country, the domestic value addition is relatively high, we can say the country is having a very strong, energized manufacturing sector, which means they can supply the raw material part and component from within the nation, which is integrated in the final export. But if the domestic value addition is declining, in that case, we can say the foreign imports are actually displacing the domestic part and component manufacturers. In the Indian context, what we see, in most of the sector, there had been a slight decline in the domestic value addition over the period, implying that there is a weakening of the manufacturing sector. So having said that, what we see in today's context, and another data I was looking at in the recent period, if we look at sector by sector, what is China's share in Indian import? Suppose India can emerge as a major exporter of the vaccines, HS30, but the APIs, HS29, would come from China. What we see, for many products, there had been a sharp rise in India's import dependence on China. Can India look for other sources for fulfilling its export obligation to the world? The reason why I'm looking at Taiwan in this context is for all other RCEP countries, India is already integrated in some way or the other. Japan, South Korea, we are already having trade agreements. With Australia and New Zealand, the FTA negotiations are on. And in all like probability, we are going to enter into the FTA soon. So with other countries like Taiwan, is there a possibility India can go for a dependence for procuring the imports materials from Taiwan, replacing China in their value chain? In certain sector, I'm not showing the data analysis here. In certain sector, the analysis reveals, yes, India can actually integrate with the Taiwanese companies more, and some of the Indian export can actually go to Taiwan. In that sense, the Indian engagement is likely to increase.
Dr. Debashis, two more minutes. You have 2 minutes more.
Right. Let me just conclude, sir, in that case. So the other point, what we can look at, trade complementarity index usually shows that whether the two countries export of India is getting more similar with the partners import, and we see over the period India is becoming more integrated with the East Asian countries. So even if we do not have RCEP partnership, we already have trade agreement with the East Asia in general, and in the recent period for energy import, coal, for instance, with Australia, the import dependence, it showed there can be a greater engagement. In FDI, technology transfer, we can see there is a possibility of having greater technology transfer from Taiwan and Japan, and India is trying to facilitate that with the improvement in ease of doing business indicator. I will just look at two of the practical problems that India might see in the remaining 1 minute. Number one, the tariff rate of India. One of the reasons the chair rightly pointed out, India did not become part of RCEP because India's average tariff rate is quite high, and the tariff reform proposal, the safeguard trigger that India suggested within RCEP was rejected. So can India try to enter into trade engagement with Australia, maybe Taiwan in future more effectively? There is going to be the same problem that India faced within RCEP. That is one. The last problem that I would like to highlight is if we look at WTO disputes, the two recent dispute India is fighting. One is on
I'm afraid you have to conclude,
Dr.
Debashis. I think you should come to your conclusion.
Yeah, I will take 30 seconds.
Yeah, yes, please.
So one dispute on sugar MSP is with Australia, and Australia is unhappy with the minimum support price we are providing. So agricultural product including that will be a problem. And second, the information technology product where WTO require member countries to put a 0% tariff. Japan and Taiwan already lodged a case against India. So there again, India has to trade very cautiously with these partners, and that might be a problem for future engagements. To conclude, there is ample scope for India, as the data suggests, technology transfer, service export, but the Indian tariff barrier and business environment might be an area that India would like to manage better. Thank you very much.
That I think was excellent. Very crisp and very good clear-cut analysis. Thank you, Dr. Debashis, for putting the issues in wonderful perspective. Thank you. We will move on to the next speaker now. The next speaker is Professor Nilanjan Banik, who is professor and program director at the School of Management, Mahindra University at Hyderabad. He will talk on engagement and isolation with China. How much does India stand to gain or lose? Dr. Nilanjan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In fact, I might want to congratulate Debashis, Professor Debashis, for already making my task easier, because he kind of touched upon some of the micro aspect of the data. And so what I am going to do is to talk more about the macro aspect of the data. So basically, what I want to do, I'm sure that my screen is visible, right? So
go ahead.
Okay, so here is the subject of discussion, that is India dependent on China, and my earlier speaker has already shown sector by sector, which are the sector where we are more dependent. And so the best part is I don't have to go to the nitty-gritty of the data. So let's try to look into the macro picture, And here, if you see India's imports from China, the figure is in Indian rupees billion. I want you to see this, the trend line is of course upward sloping, but between—
Which slide are you talking of, Dr. Nilanjan? I think this.
I'm talking about this India's import from China.
I've not, on the screen hasn't moved. Can ICS team help?
I don't know, but I have moved my screen. So
Okay,
this is—
maybe it's an issue at my place. Okay, fine.
Dr. Banik, can you just mail your presentation?
To us.
Yeah, I've already done that. If you,
I don't think we have received your
We haven't.
presentation.
Can you
Okay.
quickly do that?
At least till just before the event started, we haven't received anything.
Dr. Bonik, just a suggestion, you can unshare once and share your screen rather than the PPT window. That works better some of the time in Zoom.
Okay, so why don't I actually try to send this across? Which email address should I send it to?
The one with acaas.ics@gmail.com. I'll just message you the ID as well.
Okay, I'll just send it to you right now. So as I try to send this, basically what we are trying to do here is we are trying to look at the macro data involving India and China. And as Professor Chakraborty was mentioning, even if I'm looking into, let's say, looking into the import, India's import from, just give me a second, let me try to send this. So as I'm looking into India's import from China, you will see an upward trend. And whether we are talking about this, let's see. I'll just send this and just see whether you've got this or not. And can you open this? Did you guys get it?
Yes.
Okay. Can you just go to the third slide where—
Just give me a minute, please.
Yeah. So if I'm looking into the data, the macro data is picking up on quite few important things. The first is between the Galwan crisis, which happened in May of 2020, and it is still continuing in a way. You will find that although we are trying to minimize our dependence on China, in particular, after 2020, you will find that the import rate of goods, in particular coming in the domain of pharmaceutical and electronic sector, there has been a sharp rise in import from China. So that is clear in slide number 3. And so, are you able to open the slide, please?
Yes, just give me 1 second. I'm doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, go to the third slide. Oh no, so this is another thing. Okay, so I think I have mistaken. I have given another, I think I've mailed you the wrong one. Just give me another second. Sorry about this, because there are so many other presentations. Okay, so this is named Shivnadar. If you can open that, I've sent you again. So, and also in terms of export, meaning what the Chinese are exporting to India, you will find that this involves items which are highly income inelastic and which means that whether there is a greater demand for this product in India. For instance, if I'm talking about electronic circuits, if I'm talking about this API, which goes in the production, manufacture of the pharmaceutical items, you will, yeah. So can you please go to slide number 3, please? Yeah, so here, what I was trying to say is between 2020 and 22. So 2020 is the year when this Galwan crisis broke. And 22, you see a sharp increase, even it is sharper than the overall trend at which India's import from China was growing. So Debashis mentioned about the RCEP, which happened in 2014. But in spite of that, we are not part of RCEP. The overall trend suggests there has been a huge increase, in particular after the Galwan crisis. Now, if you go to the second, next slide. On the contrary, if I'm looking into India's export to China, again, for the period between 2020 and 2022, if I want to fit a trend, again, it will have a downward sloping. So for China, it was a sharp upward sloping. And for India, India's export to China, in fact, during recent time, it has fallen, in particular after the pandemic. Now, if you go to the third, next slide, you will find this is something which I think Professor Debashis already spoke about. If I'm looking into India's import from China, it accounts for close to 14.28% of total import from China. And so in a way, we are quite dependent on China because we are looking into this data because India's GDP, as we speak, it's around close to $3 trillion US. And 14.28% of $3 trillion US, it's a big, in absolute term, it's a big number. And if you go to the next slide, which you will find that China's import from India, it's only 0.87%, and China's GDP is, again, as you know, it's close to 15 or 16 trillion US dollars. So 0.87% as a proportion of 16 trillion as of, or vis-a-vis, let's say, almost 14% of 3 trillion, you can understand that if we do a counterfactual experiment where India stopped trading with China, in terms of absolute value, India stand to lose out in much bigger way because we are talking about the loss emanating from India's trade with China in the vicinity of only 1% of $16 trillion. On the other hand, for India, it is going to be almost 15% of $3 trillion. So that you can understand in a very, without going into much more statistical analysis, you can simply by looking at the data, you can showcase that how much we are dependent on China. Now, if you go to the next slide, this is something I was telling you. Next slide, please. So these are the major exports of India to China, and this is no brainer in the sense that most of these exports that we do are price sensitive. It is low income elastic item kind of thing. So the only thing which is India can take pride is the chemical component. Apart from that, these items are more or less elastic in demand, and there are many other countries which can supply this product. And if you, so these are the major exports item from India, which is going to China. On the contrary, if you are looking into the major export items that China is sending to India, next slide, you will find that these are, for instance, we have been reading on newspaper that how because of lack of electronic integrated circuit, the automobile industry in India was getting hampered, or for that matter, the communication apparatus, parts of electronic circuits, telephone sets. So if I'm just looking into the price elasticity, these are more price inelastic because these are more required as a part of supply chain that goes in the production of final goods and services. So for India, it is more like a final output, but for China, it is more like an intermediate output, which goes in the production of final output in India. So that therefore the necessity of these items, like my predecessors was also mentioning that how API is an important component for the Indian pharmaceutical industry. Same with the electronic integrated circuit, which is a very important component for mobile phone, mobile handset, as well as the automobile industry. Now, if you go to the next slide.
2 more minutes.
Yeah. So the next slide, you will say that there is a shortage of API and auto-integrated circuits. There has been a large scale import of solar cell, bicycles, man-made fibers, and stainless steel fat products. So this kind of showcase that how come, how much we are dependent on China. Next slide. So in order to get away from this, the government has done various interventions, but unfortunately, as of now, we are in 2022. The impact of this intervention are yet to showcase in terms of the data that we are getting. So whether it is Atmanirbhar Bharat, whether it is production linked incentive scheme, the only thing which is actually making sense as of now is this one district, one product scheme, which got started in UP, and now it is replicated in almost 27 other states in India, covering around 105 districts, where you see that some of the exports item, they have identified some of the export items, which are actually showing up results. But apart from that, Atmanirbhar Bharat or production linked incentive scheme, this is a newly launched scheme. It is yet to show any result given the macro data we have.
Dr. Nilanjan,
yeah.
To your conclusion.
Yeah, so this is my conclusion. So I think we'll have to give some more time in order to see some of the government intervention that we are having to bear the result. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that nicely complements the presentation of the earlier speaker. I think we more or less have a well-rounded picture now. Next, we move to, I'll invite Dr. Venkat Raman, who is Associate Professor at the Humanities and Social Sciences Department, Indian Institute of Management, Indore. He is also an adjunct fellow at the Institute of Chinese Studies. Dr. Venkat.
Yeah. What I would do is, just very briefly, let me go through the structure that I'm going to follow during this 10-minute presentation. To begin with, I will talk about how, this particular region is very critical for India and how, it has become very crucial for India to up its act, especially post-RCEP, because we have transitioned from look east to act east, number one. Number two, post-RCEP, once that India is out of RCEP, what are the challenges that India is, going to face and contend with? And third is, what are the opportunities that are there for India, right? And in this regard, what has it done with some of its partners till now? And going forward, how it needs to work with key players in the region to realize its, Sagar, as the Prime Minister Modi has spoken about Sagar objective, security and growth for all in the region. And therefore, become a key ally, working with other, countries in the region for realizing a very conducive Indo-Pacific, architecture. And then I would conclude. My initial remarks would be that if RCEP, India has gone out of RCEP, opted not to be part of it, then I think we need to look at it in a certain framework. And I propose this particular framework. Whereas India needs to work on its economic resilience and needs East Asian engagement with East Asia and Southeast Asia, RCEP members, also need to invest, apart from China, that is, they need to invest more on the political capital that they need to have. And if they want to invest more on their political capital, then, engaging with India is going to be more or less indispensable for them. That is number one. Number two, with India's political investment being quite reasonable till now, how does it convert it to economic benefits? That is the challenge that India is going to have. And this is of paramount importance because, bad economics sooner or later will definitely lead to bad politics. So, let me start, this with a quote by I would like to quote Prime Minister Modi when he said, and I quote, the look east policy, needs to be converted now to act east policy. He said, India is keen to develop stronger political and economic ties with the region, and RCEP was considered to be one such opportunity, but it wasn't to be. So of late, India has, by saying that it wants to go for an act east policy, it has, tried to play with whatever, strategic space that is available to go out of the, clutches of non-alignment. Although non-alignment 2.0, a call was given in 2012, under Prime Minister Modi, our foreign policy has also shown streaks of assertiveness. And in this quote, he said very openly, quote unquote, everywhere around us, we see an 18th century expansionist mindset, encroaching on another country, intruding in others' waters, invading other countries, and capturing territory. So therefore, given this kind of a sentiment that we have, how does India engage with prominent players in the region? And before I speak about, this engagement, whatever has happened till now and what, we have been doing, I need to basically also bring to light some of the challenges that India faces. Now, no matter what others say about India's pragmatic approach, India continues to be deeply influenced by, its policy of non-alignment and keep its options open. It has imposed also time to time certain kind of sharp choices to be made. And therefore, the challenge for India is, can it shed the, the tag of, again, to quote unquote, what some have said, a reluctant player, and very, very ably diplomatically use its, ability to be the swing state. Recently, in fact, yesterday, when in the opening remarks, the Japanese minister spoke about, how Japan has not been very much enthused by India's India being absent from the, from the resolution in the UN Security Council against Russia. But India has got its own, objectives. And so therefore, India decided to, exercise its autonomy, strategic autonomy. So therefore, how will the other regional players, look at India before investing further, as far as the political engagement with India is concerned? This is a challenge that India is going to face. Number two, how will India be able to convince the other states in the region to decouple their economics and politics? Because China, Japan, South Korea, ASEAN states, they all stand to gain, economically in a very big manner. So therefore, how does India basically convince these players to decouple economics and politics? And so how will India use its Act East policy with other players to counter China's BRI? Because given that China, because of its Belt and Road Initiative, is already a huge importer from this region, it's a major exporter and also a significant investor. And the next challenge is, how does India capitalize the growing distrust of China in the region in the post-COVID world and make inroads by addressing concerns stemming from the political vulnerabilities of these Southeast Asian countries and, countries like Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. So these are some of the challenges that India is going to face. Now, very quickly, I'm going to look at how India has been engaging with some of these countries in the region. So, for example, very briefly, I will look at how India has engaged with Japan, how India has engaged with South Korea and ASEAN, and then I would leave by saying that, is it enough?
Yeah, all in 4 minutes, Dr. Venkat.
Yeah. Very quickly, I'm going to look at some of the highlights. That's it. So therefore, as regards Japan, I would like to focus on how India is going to basically counter, along with Japan, China's BRI. So therefore, the Japanese Prime Minister in 2016 came up with the Expanded Partnership for Quality Infrastructure, the EQPI, and that partnership with Japan, as far as EQPI is concerned, and India's Act East policy, Japan and India Vision 225 looks at synergizing these two major, initiatives on the part of India and Japan. India also hopes to basically, partner in a deeper way with Japan in having what is known as the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, for example. As far as South Korea is concerned, as part of South Korea's new Southern policy, South Korea has advocated for free and open Indo-Pacific. And in this scheme of things for South Korea, it seeks to strengthen South and Southeast Asian, its engagement with South Asia and Southeast Asian nations, particularly with a strategic giant like India. It also basically aims to strengthen economic cooperation and build a prosperous people-centric community of peace, and joint naval exercises leading to networks resisting Chinese influence in geopolitical architecture. Prime Minister's vision of Sagar, security and growth for all in the region and Indo-Pacific region, given the importance of this region, because of the strategic competition dominated by maritime and blue economy, this India's investment on things like Project Mausam or the cotton route, and all these, projects, Southeast Asia is very, very central to India's plans. If you look at, Taiwan, for example, Taiwan, again, being out of RCEP, Taiwan under Tsai Ing-wen has come up with this new southbound policy, which all of us are aware of. However, the focus is with more ties on ASEAN, Southeast Asia, and Australia and New Zealand. But South Asia also occupies a very, very critical role. And some people have basically, said that, India and Taiwan should explore what are the intersections of interest that need to be explored to strengthen the so-called Milk Tea Alliance, which favors strengthening democratic values and protest the growing influential industry of China, the way it is, spreading its tentacles to politically control via economic interdependence of the region and the Southeast Asian region and China.
One more minute.
Yeah. So basically, to conclude, I would like to, submit that India has built strong strategic and security partnerships in Indo-Pacific. However, there is a need to focus on the economic potential. India's strategic goals in the region are peace, stability, security, prosperity, and they're integrated with the goals of building a thriving blue economy. The Ministry of External Affairs, has an Indo-Pacific department now to address concerns related to the Indian Ocean region, Indian Ocean Rim countries, the ASEAN and the Quad. However, the focus on economic potential seems to be, lacking a bit. So Atmanirbhar Bharat calls for exploring possibilities of regional value chains. And only if India is able to develop, its value chain, it's successful in developing regional value chains with this part of the region, can India present a viable alternative to China. I would stop here, and maybe we will be able to engage further.
Answers. Yes, sure. I think just in some ways a little provocative, and I think the coverage was extremely wide. Thank you. The one takeaway that seems to be there is Dr. Venkat's pointing out that how India's interfacing with the East Asia, good politics can lead to good economics, but how bad economics might lead to bad politics. With that, I think we'll move on to the next speaker. It is Dr. Roger Chi Feng, who is Associate Professor at the Department of Social Sciences, Flame University at Pune. He would be talking on promoting practical engagements between India and Taiwan with the Quad framework in the post-RCEP era, opportunities and challenges. Dr. Roger.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Please let me know.
You're audible.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank the panelists and for inviting me to this great panel to discuss important issues, especially the one between the collaboration, the further collaboration and opportunities between Taiwan and India. And I think the arrangement goes really well because it's like a stacking up of things. And now I can, go further on my part, which, the background has been built up by my previous panelist. So I'm going to go into some details regarding how India and Taiwan can work together, especially in the context of the rising China with the RCEP and plus BRI. So first, I would like to, Dr. Venkat talk about Act East policy. And I think, India has great reason not to join RCEP, at least for now. Although we know that the visiting Japanese Prime Minister Kishida has been mentioned again that it's important for India to reconsider to join RCEP. But of course, there are some structural reasons that we have to consider. I mean, the government of India and the business of India need to consider when it comes to the joining of RCEP. But the fact is, with RCEP and BRI, China has been exerting its influence, in ASEAN, among ASEAN countries especially. And ASEAN or the Southeast Asia region has been in the minds of the Chinese planner of BRI is a core region. All right, so that's a very important region for them to expand BRI to. So, BRI has been launched for the past few years. It was announced in 2013 and officially promulgated with the action plan in 2015. So for past few years, we see it has been playing the role here. So one important thing that we have to notice is the turn of some key countries in the region, including Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam, by swinging closer to China. Well, actually, this is their strategic choice, and it tells us something. And the second thing is that I think that reflects well the rising influence of China with the help of BRI. And with the launch of RCEP, for the future, we will see further integration economically and politically between ASEAN countries and China. So last year, we see that the total trade volume between key countries in this region, along with China, increased, including India's 43%, Thailand's nearly 34%, South Korea's 27%, along with Vietnam's 19.7% and Japan's 17%. People have been talking about decoupling with China and to build a resilient supply chain among the Quad countries, especially, and gain independence from Chinese influence. But how we're going to do that in this shadow of growing China is really a challenge, because as we can see here, for the past few years, the FDI flow into ASEAN countries from China increased by 65%. And in these countries receives the most increase in FDIs. And basically these things are, with the help of BRI, these things are actually construction related projects. So Malaysia, Indonesia, you can see the most increase here, along with Laos, because of the China-Laos Railway, which is a big project over there. And this is how the Chinese business view when with the launch of RCEP regarding how they are going to expand their business in Southeast Asia. So you will see that manufacturing, logistics, and non-financial services actually are among the top three that the Chinese business have a positive view regarding the launches RCEP. So how will India react to that, which is very important, because we have to remember, at least before 2015, ASEAN countries has high hope about the role of India can be played in this region, including economic role and political role, and the role in security as well. So how are we going to make sure that, well, we can stay in the game with the launch of RCEP and the rising influence of China? I think to work with Taiwan is a good way, right? Especially in the context that we are talking about the building up of resilient supply chain and the supply chain shift. Of course, well, now we see some positive development for the supply chain shift to India. But there are some challenges over here, as we can see that, well, India had a relatively weak manufacturing base, which we focus more on heavy industries rather than the consumer goods. And well, there's a lack of complete ecosystems of supply chains that we focus more on some specific sectors, including ICT and EMS. Of course, well, recently the government of India has been by having different policy incentives, including the production link incentives, PRIs, to attract the foreign direct investments, especially in the ICT and EMS area. But the policy sustainability and continuity is still something that the investors have some suspicions about. So this is among something that we have to consider. And another challenge here is that there is generally a higher hidden cost in India's current supply chains. So according to Arthur D. Little, according to their survey, the logistic costs in India's supply chains are 4 times as high as the average in developed countries. And the big chunk goes to transportation, warehousing, inventory, and order and processing and administration. So how are we going to reduce the hidden costs in the supply chain actually is a challenge for us. So I think, well, what Taiwan can play a role here is that since there is a focus on EMS and ICT manufacturing sectors, Taiwan can play a very important role here because first, Taiwan has complete supply chains, and the whole thing actually started, the whole ecosystem started in can be traced back in the 1960s and got developed in the 1980s. So the Taiwanese people know how to build up the whole supply chain in EMS and ICT and manufacturing. That's one thing. And secondly, Taiwan has great experience in dealing with China, how to do business with China, how to manufacture in China. At the same time, Taiwan is politically confrontational with China. And this actually is the experience that, well, India has been having for the past few years. And Taiwan actually can offer this kind of tip for India as well.
Dr. Roger, 2 more minutes.
2 more minutes. And there is a high overlap areas between India and Taiwan, including this I have listed over here. So what should India and Taiwan do together? I think the first important thing is that further economic arrangements is very important. Of course, Taiwan and India now have bilateral investment agreements, but that's not enough. I think it's important for us to reconsider a more comprehensive FTA-like framework, like an economic cooperation agreement between India and Taiwan. That's the first thing. Second thing, we should explore the possibility to work together between India and Taiwan in all the multilateral mechanisms. For example, the GCTF Global Cooperation and Training Framework that the US and Japan has built up for Taiwan should include India as well. And the RCSI, the Resilient Supply Chain Initiative under the Quad framework by Japan, India, and Australia should include Taiwan as well. And we should also consider to expand and redefine the nature of relations by expanding more relations from economic center to people relationship. And finally, I think what India and Taiwan can work together is that Taiwan has a great experience of dealing with China in all different fronts and aspects. And this is a great and precious experience that Taiwan can share with India, well, in business, in investment, even in security affairs. So there are a lot of things that Taipei and New Delhi can work together. I think we should explore more of that. I think I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was an interesting insight. Pulling out of Rsap is not the end of the road for India, and how India and Taiwan can definitely collaborate and for the mutual economic benefit of one another. I think that is, but what are the potential pitfalls? I think you pointed out quite well. Quite an optimistic paper. Thank you. That was refreshing. Next, I would call upon Dr. Tohai Liu, the Director, Center for WTO Studies and Adjunct Professor of Diplomacy, National Chengchi University of Taipei. Dr. Tohai would be talking on Taiwan-India economic relations in the post-RCEP era. Dr. Tohai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, you're audible. Carry on.
Oh, okay. So it's my great pleasure to join this session to present my perspective. Basically, from my observation, since Prime Minister Modi came to office in 2014, Taiwan and India have greatly enhanced our economic interaction. I would like to identify the three waves. Number one is Prime Minister Modi himself. He was known for his administrative capacity. So that is why when he came to the Prime Minister and he promoted making India initiative, Taiwanese companies led by Foxconn, Wingstrong, and Pegatron, they are all Apple suppliers, OEM. That is why they are doing OEM of Apple smartphone. They all shifted their production lines to India from China. So this is a very important, this first wave. Then followed by second waves from our side. Our President Tsai Ing-wen came to power in 2016. She launched what's so-called new southbound policy, targeting at 18 countries in Southeast Asia, as well as South Pacific. India definitely is one of the major targets. So in that case, this kind of collaboration from both governments done. And then the third wave came by 2020, primarily from the Indian side, not direct toward Taiwan, but served a very important favorable for the future economic interactions between the two countries. That means by 2020, India made the strategic decision. That means India is ready to side with United States. That is why India banned more than 70 Chinese apps, including TikTok, and also, not allowing Huawei to attend India's 5G bid. Right? So in that case, India decided to do its own 5G with the Reliance help. So at the same time, US big tech companies led by GAFA, Microsoft, and Walmart, the 6 tech companies, they witnessed what happened in India during the pandemic era. They believe India is quite lucrative e-commerce market. So that is why all of them poured billions of dollars into India, join India's e-commerce market. So that's also very important in this regard. So that means India and the United States are working together in e-commerce. We also need to note, on the other hand, China has greatly enhanced this kind of e-commerce in Southeast Asia. So that's served as very important, contrast. So then we also needed to know, in recent years, India has changed its FTA policy from a lukewarm attitude to a proactive attitude. So that is why recently India has just completed FTA with UAE, and India has already reached agreement with Australia to conclude the CEPA by the end of this year. India is also engaging actively in FTA negotiation with UK and the EU. So that means that India has, even though India so far hasn't joined RCEP, India has decided to expand this kind of FTA policy with the rest of the world. So that's also positive for future India-Taiwan relations, because our side is also very eager to sign this kind of a bilateral economic agreement. So we can also find out when Prime Minister Modi presented the new policy to encourage the foreign companies, high-tech companies, to come to India to produce the semiconductors. So again, Foxconn emerged as the first foreign company to sign an agreement with Vedanta to make $100 million investment in India to produce chips. So this is again saying Taiwan is very eager to join India's initiative, economic initiative. So in the future, we can, I believe, this kind of positive development will become even more robust. Why I said so? Number one, from Taiwan perspective, India is very important, because now India actually served as very important strategic pivot when it comes to the Asian economic integration, as well as the Sino-US economic, trade war. Okay, so in that case, India is inside the ASEAN plus 6. Taiwan is not included, and then India involved this kind of collaboration with United States in e-commerce. What is even more, when the U.S. President Biden came to power, he has already announced his new approach, what is so-called Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, focusing on digital economy, trying to set up digital norms. So that is why India, Australia, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, all democratic countries are very enthusiastic to join this U.S. Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. So that's, again, provided very important driving forces behind future India-Taiwan cooperation. We also have witnessed the very latest events, such as Japanese Prime Minister Kishida just paid a visit to India and decided to provide 3 trillion yen investment in India's infrastructure project. One more important investment from Japan, that is the Suzuki. Suzuki has decided to invest billions of dollars in India to produce the batteries, EV batteries. So then, you know, Taiwan's Foxconn has already reached this kind of EV deal with the US's Frisky. So according to Foxconn's future development, actually, he is going to focus on US, EU, and then India. So it's quite identifiable. So that is why I think this is a very important breakthrough in terms of Taiwan's investments. Previously, Foxconn focused on you know, smartphones. And other Taiwanese companies
you have 2 more minutes.
tend to focus. Thank you. Tend to focus on the Internet of Things and others. Now we are moving into a new field, that's in semiconductors. And we also need to know, given the intimate business collaboration between Taiwan and Japan, it is very important to know that once Japan increased its investment in India, that will definitely followed by Taiwanese companies, because most of the time Taiwanese companies and Japan are collaborate with each other. For example, Foxconn already merged the shop and then work on robots. Okay, so that is why I believe there are very positive future between Taiwan and India. That is why I feel very happy to write this paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I think you finished before time. Thank you so much. Once again, another positive and optimistic presentation, pointing out to the potential areas of cooperation between India and Taiwan. Thank you. I think I should, I will request the audience to post questions in the chat box so that we can quickly take them up one by one. I think we are getting the larger point that we seem to be arriving at is that post India's pullout from Rsap, it's not doomsday. There are areas of concern, but there are definitely very many interesting areas to look at, and how India can capitalize on it is, I think, one of the overarching themes that seems to be emerging from the various presentations. So that, I think, is extremely positive kind of contribution to the discussions that we have been having. The secondary one is how concretely India and Taiwan can cooperate despite a mismatch in a number of areas. How do we capitalize on complementarities and take it forward so that there is adequate gain for both the sides? I think that is another very welcome point that seems to be emerging from the discussions. So we wait for the questions from the audience, but in the meantime, if I think Professor Sandeep Mishra has a point to raise. Professor Sandeep?
Hello, yes, sir.
Please.
Yeah, I think I learned a lot from these presentations. And but one actually, and I'm not from economics background, so please pardon me if I'm making some very, you can say, inappropriate, you can say, question. But the question, like, my general understanding appears to be that we are saying that India did not join RCEP because we had certain problems in that. But if I look at, and then again, we argue that anyway, we are having free trade agreement or CEPA with ASEAN, with Japan, with South Korea, and we are going to have with Australia also. So almost, let's say, New Zealand and China apart, we are having already. So what we have been, let's say, are we not making contradictory, you can say, claims that if we can do without FTA, if FTAs are, so I think this question may be addressed by Venkat, because actually he talked about India's foreign policy challenges, or anybody. So how to, they say, understand India's policy, whether we are for FTA and CEPA kind of relationship, or we are having reservation with that kind of approach.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think you made your question. Who would like to take it? Is it, I think it's either Dr. Venkat or Dr. Nilanjan or Dr. Debashis. Who would like to take it?
Yeah, so just, this is a question which Professor Sandeep has come up with, is something which I'm sure, the policymakers are also contending with, and which I think very briefly I mentioned, how are we, dealing with our non-alignment, which is very much a part of our DNA, and yet at the same time become more aspirational to have a larger kind of a role in influencing a certain kind of architecture which is conducive to our development. And in this whole process, I think, and again, I did not get time. I would like to quote, the External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar. He said the Indo-Pacific concept is not tomorrow's forecast, but yesterday's reality. It captures India's broadening horizons, widening interest in globalized activities. Indo-Pacific is central to India's exports and imports. That's what he said. So therefore, I think India is very, very keen to, develop relationships with, Northeast Asian countries apart from China and and the ASEAN countries, whereby it is able to reinvigorate its maritime strategy. And how it is going to reinvigorate its maritime strategy and be able to pose an option alternative to BRI, which is going to be very, very critical. And I think that is where India is dealing with. But until unless India is able to entice these countries with enough of an economic benefits, I'm afraid political engagement per se is not going to lead to handsome dividends. So I think that is the challenge which we are going to have. How are we going to play this balancing role between streaks of non-alignment and again streaks of assertiveness to protect and promote our own interests?
I'd like to have the responses from Dr. Nilanjan and Debashis on this particular issue. But before I let them do it, I think one point that we need to keep in mind that the Indian experience with the FTA, and I'm sure both these two speakers would bear me out on this, our experience with the FTA till now has been unfavorable to us. The gains have been to the other side. This is generally our experience. So, possibly there needs to be a rethink. This does not mean that you don't get into FTAs. I think that it's a completely different point. That is one. Number two, India pulled out of RCEP, but will it join it again? Will it join? The doors are open. Does it make sense for us to join? In one way, it makes sense for us to join after a period of time, after we are able to work out our comparative advantage. You see, there are a number of places where we need to tighten ourselves. We can call ourselves emerging giant, whatever. But what matters when you enter the foreign trade realm is different. There, competition is fierce. It is unforgiving. You can't say that, what is that term? This Unni's business is not going to work there at all. Okay, so it is ruthless competition. So we have to pull our socks in a number of areas. I have a list of areas. I'm not going to give the details. So once, maybe there is a good, this is a time where we pull our socks, be ready, and then get back to ourselves. This can be debated, but I would like a quick reaction from Dr. Nilanjan and Dr. Debashis on this issue.
So I think my 2 cents on this is whether we are part of RCEP or not, the matter of the fact remains that over the last 2 years, there has been a very much increase in imports from China. So this whole argument that what is going to happen if we were to be part of RCEP, or for that matter, not part of RCEP, I think at this point of time, the reality is whether we are there or not there, in something I was trying to mention, because we are importing certain crucial intermediate inputs without which we cannot do away with. Whether we are part or we are not part, we'll have to import. And therefore, this is going to continue. That's my only observation.
Dr. Debashis?
I just add 2 lines here. Number one, when we are negotiating with Japan, South Korea, or Australia bilaterally, in fact, that's what India is preferring for the time being, unless we consolidate the manufacturing sector, then it's much easier for India to get the requisite flexibility in the agreement, be it tariff preference, be it safeguard provision, etc. The moment we get into RCEP, for instance, we know that there had been very strong provision on intellectual property right. And why? Because we know Japan, Australia, South Korea, Singapore, all are part of the ACTA, Anti-Counterfeit Trade Agreement. We all remember European Union confiscated the pharmaceutical product in Rotterdam port earlier, which was going from India to Brazil, not even intended for the European Union market. And they said generic medicine, whether there is permission from the original developer of the molecule, that had to be checked. So obviously from Indian perspective, I say in the short run, joining RCEP is difficult from that proposition, where we have to give in to the negotiating perspective of 15 countries collectively. So my summary would be, India may consider RCEP joining. As Dr. Bonik rightly identified, we require the core technology and intermediate inputs, but maybe, as the recent policy and Prime Minister Modi's statements reveal, we would like to reduce our dependence on China. So if no China, joining RCEP perhaps is going to be delayed, and we would like to continue our engagement with other RCEP members bilaterally.
Thank you. I see there are 2 questions in the chat box, one for Dr. Debashis and one for Dr. Venkat. Dr. Venkat?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
yes, please.
Take the question in the chat box. What is preferable, coupling or decoupling of political and economic capital?
Well, I think it depends on which side of the table you are. I mean, so for example, if you look at from the Southeast Asian nations, for example, can they afford to decouple politics and economics? The answer is perhaps no. Now, within politics and economics, for them, political investment is more because they know that they are increasingly, relying on China, and the interdependencies are going, becoming more and more in depth. So therefore, they need to have viable alternatives, and India is definitely a very important, alternative for them, especially given that US seems to have withdrawn from the region. And if you look on India's perspective, can India basically afford to decouple politics and economics? The answer is no. But then we have to choose and prioritize economics over politics. So I think this decoupling and politics and economics, for me personally, is a non-existential question, because both of them, mutually reinforce each other.
Okay, thank you. I think we're going to be quick now. Dr. Debashis, I request you to be brief, because I'd like Dr. Roger and Dr. Kohai to give their final comments also. We'd like to have that. First is Dr. Debashis.
Just 2 points I believe would be very important. One, definitely the question of import tariff will be crucial. We have seen during the RCEP negotiation, India tried to go for a tired tariff negotiation thing, that with respect to China and with respect to Japan, there should be different form of tariff negotiation things. So we have seen for Taiwan, in fact, I showed with a table in my presentation also, India's tariff is quite high as compared to the same of Taiwan. So for any trade engagement, to what extent we can get a tariff protection from Taiwanese exports, that will be a very crucial question. And my sense is for many engineering products, Taiwan would like to have 0% duty for obvious reasons. That can be a very major challenge for India. Precisely when Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India, we want to consolidate the domestic manufacturing sector. The second point, which I think will be very important is, I also mentioned that very briefly, for the information technology agreement at WTO, all countries are supposed to put 0% tariff on the ICT product. There is an ICT-1 agreement. The ICT-1 list was drawn around 1996, and today we are discussing the ICT-2. Now, for many products like smartphone, handset, for instance, India want the country to be a hub for production of these elements. As a result of that, we have started putting non-zero, around 5 or 10% tariff in several product categories in recent period, and Taiwan, as I noted, lodged a formal complaint in WTO. Now, India has said to WTO, we are not going to join the ICT-2 discussions. I don't really see Taiwan being very happy with export prospect in India, where the ever-growing ICT list India is not going to honor and set 0% duty. So these two, in my opinion, would be two very major areas where there can be some degree of conflict when the two countries go for greater engagements.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that was quite nicely put. I would invite Dr. Tohai to give his final comments. You have 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. So I believe India now is in a very favorable environment. Why I say so? Because everybody knows India's strength is in service sector, right? That is also why India suffered so much when India signed the FTA with the ASEAN or other Northeast Asia countries. So that is why in my presentation, I mentioned about the U.S. Indo-Pacific economic framework targeting at digital trade. So India, in terms of the e-commerce, enormous potential. Then e-commerce, fintech, as well as the mobile pay, those together, India is very powerful. That is why GAFA, those US high-tech companies are coming. Right? And then collaboration with Taiwan that will help India not only can produce a smartphone already done, Apple, in terms of Apple OEM. On the other hand, now we are moving toward a very possible EV, given what I just mentioned about Japan and Taiwan and India. And then that can also reach the goal of Prime Minister Modi to produce India's own EV, rather than waiting for Tesla to come to India. So that is why I think India has a very bright future. Of course, India needs to choose your battle, okay? So you can benefit from the future, because China also focusing on digital BRI, actually, or what's called the ICT-based new economy. Okay, so initially China wanted to include India into China's digital BRI, but now India has moving toward the US side. So giving what we just mentioned about decoupling or not, actually a new Cold War based upon trade, technology are informing. Okay, so that is why e-commerce is the new economy is going to be mattered most. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Very nice comments. Can I request Dr. Roger to take 2 minutes and give his ideas?
Thank you, Chair. I think, well, for Sandeep, Professor Mishra's question, well, I think India has a tendency to, engage bilaterally in economic arrangement other than joining in, a big multilateral platform in which India has no control. So I think that makes sense. So well, I think we don't have to view the withdrawal from RCEP as the end of the day or the doomsday. Well, actually, there are other ways to manage that. And when it goes back to the Indian-Taiwan relations, I would say that, well, I think, well, the relationship is like a give and take. So for the past few years, we have been seeing the improvements between the bilateral relationship, the setting up of the Taiwan desk for the improvement and facilitation of investment is a good thing. And then the BIA, the bilateral investment agreement, which is another good thing. But for the FTA or the CCAS/CPA between Taiwan and India, actually, that's not a new idea. Well, the two sides have been talking about that, explore the possibilities since 2013. But for some reason, it's got stopped somewhere. So I think it's time to bring this back to at least explore that. And as I said, this is a give and take situation. So the Taiwanese actually has expectation as well. Well, the government in India may consider some of these items sensitive, but actually this is something that we can do. For example, well, as the increase of the investment amounts from the Taiwanese side, the government of India should consider, to expand the Taiwanese representative office here in India. Now we have two. Well, New Delhi is TECC and another one in Chennai. So if a lot of business are moving to Mumbai, why not consider this idea to have another representative office? I think this is a very practical things that the two governments can think about. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that covers most of the thing. We are coming close to time, and I think Surbi is switched on her camera to remind me that. I should thank each and every one of the speakers. It was a wonderful learning experience for me. I thank the organizers and the invisible team, which was in the background and which took care of the minor and major glitches. I think deserves our thanks. I think ultimately, finally, I would like to end the session saying that I think the discussion we had now basically tries to tell us that whichever side of the table you sit, to borrow a phrase from Venkat, whichever side of the table you sit, try to make the best of the situation, because it's not a depressing situation at all. Try to look for the positives and capitalize on it. I think this is the major message given by all the speakers. And I think with this refreshing message, I declare this session ended. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Let me conclude this session by thanking the Chair, Professor G. Balatchandirane, the panel convener, G. Venkat Raman, and the 4 panelists for joining us. The video recordings of all our session will be available on our ICS YouTube channel. We shall now have a break of 45 minutes and resume at 1:30 p.m. for the 4th thematic panel discussion. Please note that the meeting room will remain open for the next session. We would encourage you all to stay back with your videos and audios off. Thank you for logging in. Have a good day.